What's up, y'all? Love y'all. Let's do this. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go into a nice, fun adventure. All right. I call it Afro City is the place for this lecture for today. And I'm going to take you black to the future. I say that because my work speaks to my love of comic books, my love of history, all history really, as well as my love of science fiction. Growing up, I'm going to keep it real. Black Panther was my favorite superhero, and everyone used to laugh at me because they thought it was like a fake Batman. Growing up, it wasn't cool to like Black Panther. Now everyone's like, oh yeah, Black Panther's the best, but like back in the day, it wasn't. On the right side of the screen, you can see all of these are actually my comic books, and as you can tell, they're not. It's kind of blurry because it's inside the wrapping and the plastic. And when you're a comic book nerd, you don't ever like take them out the plastic. You got to make sure they keep them nice and clean. So I would like read them one time, then like make notes. I'll even like try to draw it. That's how I learned how to draw. And then I would put it right back into the sleeve and never ever open it up again. So I may have only looked at these comics maybe like one time, maybe two at the most. And I would just have notes inside the bag that would explain like the storyline because I didn't want to mess up. That's how nerdy I am, all right? So I represent that all day. Also growing up, I was a big fan of cartoons and Star Wars and Star Trek. And Star Trek Next Generation was really powerful for me because it was the first time you actually saw like a lot of people of color, Black people actually in space and in time. And a lot of times you never ever saw a Black person like in the future. And so I was really enamored by that. I even to the point that like when you would see a Klingon, I always saw them as being Black as well. So Worf, you're a brother as well. So, and growing up, I mean, which I still have, I have dyslexia. So I didn't like a lot of books, but the books I did like were always like mysterious or science fiction led. So Octavia Butler, as well as was like one of my favorites in the genre. So things that I were interested in reading in. And probably growing up, the book that was the most impactful for me was Fahrenheit 451. And I kind of feel like that's how we're living in today. I mean, as you can see, there's a bunch of boxes that we're all looking through. And then I'm talking to you through a screen. And so it's like, wow, that now it's 2020 and we're all living like this. We're living like this in this utopian / dystopian world that we're all speaking through windows to the future. So from there, I'm like Sydney. We're both from Atlanta, and growing up, I always wanted to be an artist, but I didn't really think about going to an art school. I didn't start going to art school till a lot later, into my 30s. So my background is mostly in drawing and like printmaking. And when I was 18, right out of high school, I started doing posters for all of the great rap artists or rap groups that would come into Atlanta. So I would make their posters for them. And then I had a friend that actually his cousin was a part of the Crisscross. So that kind of ages me, shows you where I know. So I started to make a lot of artwork for Crisscross, and then I got introduced to So Def and Lil Wayne and Jermaine Dupri, and I would do artwork for them as well. So that's how I really made my living doing art. I never really had a 9-to-5 job. I was always making art. And that's something to tell other people. Even if you work in ceramics, that shouldn't stop you to make other work and be informed by the things that you already know. Lastly, I had mentioned that I'm into history, and I'm into all history, but I'm going to speak primarily about the history growing up in high schools and even in college, and the history that you never really know about, and that's the Middle Passage. And that was when the enslaved Africans coming from Africa, going into the Atlantic on the slave ship, and then being transferred to what they said it was the New World of like the Caribbean, South America, and North America. And I always was struck by this imagery. First of all, it's very violent and hurtful, but more of like, this is just cargo. How come when we were taught this part of history, we never knew who were these people were? What kind of places did they go to? I don't even know where in Africa these Africans were at. You know, we never even talked about that in schools, to the point of, were they kings? Were they queens? What kind of food did they eat? What kind of things did they like to do for fun or in parties? Or what kind of food did they eat? So I always felt like that was something that was always in the back of my mind about, like, how do these people come? We're always talking about like Alex Island and seeing, you know, Lady Liberty, and like knowing how those immigrants came to the New World. So it's always like, well, what about their cultures? What did they do? Are they just like, now we just put them into like this space, and then we say this happened here for Black people, and then now we have them as enslaved. Okay, now we have Abraham Lincoln, who so-called freed the slaves. So then, you know what I mean? So it was never like into the context of Black people themselves. So that kind of leads into how I see my artwork. I see my work as like an idea of home, and what is home. We all want to live in an environment that you feel like you're one and being a part of something of greater than yourself. So with that, I started to doing a lot of research about this. In 2012 is when I first started thinking about this, when I started going to the University of Kennesaw State, right outside of Atlanta, and thinking about like how I wanted to recreate work. And at the time, it was mostly in print. I didn't even start working in clay until 2015, but I traveled to Europe. So I went to France and also Italy and Switzerland. And I was just struck by the cathedrals, and something like, from ever since I was in high school, something came back. You know, 15 years later, you're starting to think, oh man, look at this imagery of Christianity and things like that. And especially since as a Christian, that kind of like struck me. The one thing, if you look on the right, you see the rose window, and in the bottom, you see the different windows. But if you notice the outline of the windows, it reminisces to me of the Middle Passage. And that was pretty powerful to think like they were even using their iconography was very similar to a slave ship. So that kind of like brought it to another level, because many of the um, slave traders and those that actually had enslaved Africans, they tried to make it seem like that was the thing for the righteous, because, you know, they were told by God that they had the right to take over another people's body. So from there, I started pushing this idea further. And then, like I said, in 2015, that's when I first started working in clay. And I had a great mentor, Jeff Campana, who's the professor there, as well as Keith Smith, who's also the other professor at Kennesaw State. And so my work was dealing a lot about the Middle Passage. And I started to like really love the opportunity of making work that wasn't just 2D, but three-dimensionally. So I applied to the University of Iowa, and luckily I was able to get in. And there, it was like a whole new environment. Coming from Atlanta and then moving to the Midwest, it was like not very many people that looked like myself. I hardly ever saw anyone of color, let alone a Black person. So when you would see someone Black or even Hispanic or anything, or even Asian, you would walk to them and just look at them and be like, yo, what's up? And you like give them a dap, and you would just keep it moving. You wouldn't even like, it was kind of funny because like you didn't know those people, but you felt like you knew them because you knew how they were living, because you didn't never really see anyone that looked like you there. So that started making me think my first year in grad school in 2017 about what it feels like to be welcome and hospitable to other people. And the pineapple came to mind. It was like one of the first things I started thinking, like, what's that symbol? And for me, it's because like when I was younger, my mom would like after church, we would go to like people's homes, and there was like this one family that was had a lot of money, and they had like a big foyer, and in front of the foyer had a huge pineapple, but it looked like it was gold. Of course, it was probably brass, and I was like, why do they have a big pineapple here? And my mom was like, well, that means, welcoming. They're going to be like amazing. They're going to have some good fried chicken here tonight. So we're going to have some good food. So I was like, what? I was like, yeah, yeah. So I was like, so that was putting me back in the mind that I was like, you see a pineapple, they're going to be good people and they're going to like treat you right. So I know that sounds like, kind of funny, but that's how I always thought of it. So that kind of came back to me in my own work. But yet I never really understood why the pineapple was a symbol for welcoming hospitality. Let's start breaking that down. First of all, a pineapple is a plant. It doesn't grow on trees, and it's not from Hawaii. A lot of times, everyone, when I first started showing my work in critiques at the University of Iowa, they would be like, you're appropriating. You are not Hawaiian, are you? And you're not from Hawaii, so why are you working with pineapples? Pineapples is their culture about welcoming and hospitality. This is, multiple people said this, from grads to undergrads to professors. And I'm like, actually, pineapples are not even from Hawaii. Hawaiians never even heard of a pineapple until 1880. And that kind of shocked them. They were like, what you talking about? I've been to Hawaii. When you come down from the plane, you get yourself a lei, and then they get you a big pineapple drink. So I know it's from their culture. And I was like, no, you've been tricked. You've been tricked. You've been bamboozled. You've been led astray. You've been led astray by the Dole Pineapple Company. The Dole Pineapple Company is the reason why we even think of the pineapple being from Hawaii. In 1903 to 1908 is when they decided to use the newfound state of Hawaii to use that as a way to brand the amazing pineapple as an exotic fruit that all people should want to eat in America. And that's how we get the idea that welcoming hospitality is the culture of Hawaii. So where do we get this from? So what is the true origins of welcoming and hospitality for the symbol of pineapple? Well, actually, pineapples are firstly cultivated in South America as well as the Caribbean. So what happened was the indigenous people in South America, they cultivated these pineapples, most likely in Peru and Chile, as well as but mostly Peru and Chile. So what they would do, they would use this for their ceremonies and drink it to the point that they would make it fermented for alcohol. And they would have that for their parties and things of that nature. From there, they would use it as trade to the indigenous people in the Caribbean, and a lot of them in the Barbados. And that's how pineapples actually was cultivated in the Caribbean through back and forth of trade with South America. From there, during the Enlightenment time in 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, during colonialism, many of the European countries saw the greatness of the pineapple. And they wanted to use that pineapple as a symbol to show their power. And specifically, King Charles II, he was one of the greatest in cultivating pineapples in Barbados as well as in South America. And what his own nickname was called King Pine. So he loved the pineapple. He even had paintings as well as different decorations with the pineapple all over his kingdomship in England. But so this is how we're starting to get the idea of welcoming and hospitality. What they would do is they would never even eat the pineapple. They would use it as decoration. Because first of all, if you go back, the pineapple looks very hard to eat. And it was very hard to even cultivate a pineapple in Europe, to the point that a pineapple being shipped from the Caribbean or South Carolina or Georgia or in South America, it would cost like $4,000 for each pineapple to make it. So it was very expensive. So they didn't even really want to eat it. So what they would do is they would put it in the middle of as a center table for, as a mark of how beautiful the arrangement of the food will be, all the great things that they'll have when they bring new dignitaries to come in, or those who are in the bourgeois who wanted to look rich as well, they would have a pineapple there. When the pineapple would get bad and start to ripe, then that's when they would give it to the poor. And like King Charles II would say, eat my shit. So it was like a representation of like my power and all the things that I've done can even help the poor. For those who had money but didn't have enough money to get a pineapple is where they would actually make teapots of that nature, and that would look like a pineapple. So they would also use that as a sign of welcoming. Now, the other half is the hospitality. And that was because of showing the abundance of food that they were getting from those who were working the cultivation of enslaved Africans and the indigenous people. But the second half of it was also a beacon. What the foreman would do when they would see a new shipment of enslaved Africans coming to the new world, to the dock, the foreman would run out with a pineapple and put a spigot with a big spike on a fence post and put a pineapple and stick it in there and say, so they would recognize that it was a new shipment of enslaved Africans coming to the United States or the Caribbean or South America. So it was like a signifier that a shipment of human beings were coming. So just think about that. This is the first thing a Black person would see. How is that welcoming? So from there, I started learning all about that research and then creating artwork from that. Of course, when you start making work, it's always very literal. And this piece actually was in the 2019 NCECA jury show for students. And it combines my love of ceramics as well as printmaking. The slashed up pineapple is like a representation of bookends. So when this is actually being presented, I actually have books inside between the middle halves of each half of the pineapple, was signifying like books on cultivation, colonialism, Star Wars, Star Trek, and things of that nature, speaking about empire, because this piece speaks to the idea of who has the power to create abundance. And the juice is a metaphor for power, as well as how you use that power. So I have one of my prints that I actually printed on the clay, and it's an Afro pick that has the Death Star on top of a Afro pick. Instead of the sign of the peace sign or a black fist, I put a Death Star, and that was like kind of representation of like that there was a empire that we know nothing about. Many of the Africans that were enslaved most likely came from Ghana or Nigeria. So it was like great empires like Benin and Yoruba people. So it's like, we don't even know about those people, which kind of hurts when you are in the African diaspora and you want to know where you come from. So from there, I was continually thinking about the research and noticing a lot of the paintings during that time period would show enslaved women with their breasts hanging out and showing the abundance of like a basket of fruit for pineapple, signifying that not only they can cultivate, but they also can cultivate their bodies. And so also was very struck by how like it was like raping just right in front of us, and people are using that as a beautiful picture and having that in their homes. So from there, once again, I was like going real literal with the work at first, because you're just starting to translate all the things that you're learning. And this piece I called Aphrodisiac, and I'm taking from the idea of like the abundance as well as the idea of like fertility, but also giving back the power to all the amazing Black women in my life and all the great things that Black women have done. So it's like taking back some power and showing that we're not just someone's abundance. So from there, I wanted to continue thinking this further. So I wanted to learn more about the history of those who were actually enslaved. And I was really struck by the kings in Benin. It's very powerful when you think about like when you study Greeks and Roman history, and you can go to all of the Roman Empire and look at every single like go from Augustus to, all the way to Constantine, to all of the great emperors. But so does the kingdom of Benin. They have a list of all of the great kings. And once again, no one talks about that. We always like talk about, oh yeah, how great, the first emperor of Rome was Octavius Augustus, but we never speak about the great kings when we talk about countries in Africa. So from there, I started looking at it in a way of a formal, just looking at the headdress and things of that nature. And it started like making me think of an astronaut. So just like looking at it formally, I was like, man, that's just deep to me. Because I felt like when you go to a new environment, especially coming from Atlanta to Iowa, I felt like I was an astronaut myself, going into a new world and meeting new people. And so I took those ideas and tried to mash them together to show that like we're more than just a Black person. We have things in our mind and thoughts, and we all don't think the same. So from there, I started creating this True King series of Afronauts that combined the face shields of the enslaved Africans when they were supposedly speaking too much. And I did that because I wanted to speak to the idea of so many times when you're in spaces and you're the only Black person or person of color in the place, it's sometimes very hard to speak your truth because other people are looking like, what are you talking about? So it was an ideal of making like them as heroes. Like, we have power, once you put this mask on, you can now do amazing things, just like in the comic books. So from there, I wanted to like continue that idea, but I was thinking it was kind of limiting when you just do something that's figurative. So I wanted to like take like what is really the essence of welcoming and hospitality. We know that the pineapple's true history is very dark, even though we don't know it. It's just like when you're young and you are told to like sing, London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down, London Bridge is falling down. I mean, that is crazy that kids are singing this song, right? And like we think of it as some kind of thing that is like beautiful, and then not really understand the true meaning of that song. So it's kind of like how like every time now that I get a pineapple, I learn more about like it's a beautiful fruit, but there's so much more that we don't even know about the true origins. So taking that as my cue, I wanted to begin to like think of like the traditions of those African traditions that those who were enslaved on those ships, what kind of traditions of welcoming and initiation would they have? But I wanted to push it further to like, I wanted the actual touch and feel. So many times when you look at sculpture, it looks harsh. It looks like you shouldn't be able to touch it. And it kind of made me think of, I want to do something opposite. I want it to be like, it's clay, but is it clay? I feel like I can touch it. And I want these pieces to be welcoming. And also because so many times people see art as something that is for the rich or those who know more than they think they need to do. They need to go to school to learn about these artists, or how do you act in etiquette when you go to a museum or gallery. So from there, I was looking at many of the initiation and as well as the head dresses and the breastplates of these amazing peoples in Africa. And most likely a lot of them were coming from West Africa, where many of the enslaved Africans came from to the New World. So from there, I also was thinking about like, wow, raffia is a major part in a lot of things that we do. I see a lot of raffia in South Carolina as well as in Georgia. And so for huts, when they were, for those who were the enslaved in the slave quarters, they would go back to what they know. So that also reminded me of hair. It also reminded me of like a domicile of home. So that texture of raffia keeps going back to my mind. Also, the idea of hair is something that for me is very welcoming. And for most people, they're like, oh, why is hair welcoming? I don't want to see no hair when I'm cooking or when I'm eating. I don't want to see no strand of hair while I'm eating. That's nasty. But for me, I always felt like hair was something of a loving, welcoming thing. My mom, she has a lot of mental issues, and one of the things that she deals with is she pulls her hair out. And for me, when I tell people that, like, oh, that's sad. I'm like, actually, it's not, because I would know when I would come back home from school and I would see hair on the kitchen table or by the um, telephone, I knew my mom was home. So it was like a representation of like, this is a welcoming, loving texture that I know that she's safe. And I will always be able to know because her hair, she'll take her hair out and everywhere she's at. So I'll know that she was here. Also, you can take it to another place. I'm a big, like I said, a fan of mysteries and TV shows that have like cops and robbers and trying to figure out who they are. And like CSS is like one of the prime examples of that. And they are always looking for hair follicles. And for hair follicles, then they'll know who this person was or where they can possibly find them. So I always saw hair as something more of a way to like going back, more really going back to your roots. Even though I'm not from Africa, I've never been to Africa, but I'm still a part of the African diaspora. And I still feel like my body and everything around me speaks African. So from there, I wanted to like think about how I would present this idea of welcoming hospitality, since I know so much about the history of the pineapple, but like, how do I want to create the work? These pieces are dream pieces from Aboriginal artists in Australia. And that kind of spoke to me about the idea of being transcended to another world. What they would do is take pigment and put it on a stick and then just make these dots. So I kind of felt like it reminded me of my interest in printmaking. And like when I'm scratching on a plate, that kind of reminds me of like of a mark, and that mark takes me places. So I get into like a transcendental state when I'm just making a bunch of marks and scratching. So that was like, wow, that kind of speaks to me formally, conceptually, and also how I like to process making work. So from that, this is how I create the ceramic pieces that I'll be showing today. Once again, I make that idea of the pineapple. I love that shape because it has like a bodily shape. It has the bottom looks like a body or a head, and the top looks like a crown of the bouquet of the pineapple. But it also formally it looks like R2D2's body. You know, it looks like a trash can. So every time I make my work, it always starts in this trash can look or R2D2 pineapple. Even if it has openings or anything, it always starts that way. And I use my hands to create the bulging areas coming forward or coming inward. And from there, once I make the shape, or that's very quick. I never make any drawings. I don't ever come up with like, this is what I'm going to do first. It's always like intuitive. Anything I'm listening to in my headphones, that's where I'm going. Or there's music being played in the studio. I'm just vibing off that. So I can make let's say if it's 20 inches tall, I could do the form in like 5 hours. But then when I now are going slow with the work is when I use just a regular needle tool. And it kind of reminds me of my love of etching. And on the right side is one of my prints and etchings. So I kind of use that as like my tool to create the texture of welcoming. This idea of like hair, of carpet, of a nice soft blanket, a shaggy dog, hair, raffia, clothing, you know, beautiful like ruffles. So I'm thinking of all those different things to create the work. Also, I'm thinking about waves. Listening to the music in my headphones, I'm thinking of like, you know, the beat and then the rhythm of that mark that goes with that beat. So I'm jamming in my headphones, listening to like Lil Wayne or something, and then I'm just going with it. Just like when you see a wave, I'm seeing it also. It's like a ripple effect. Just like when you're young or anytime you have like skipping rocks or when the idea of the wavelength of a music, just like the wavelength in someone's hair. So from there, I also take a lot of the concepts and names for my pieces from science fiction. For those who may not know, this is a Dalek, and that's from one of the greatest TV shows of all time. And it's from the BBC's Doctor Who, which is like the longest running TV show in the world. And if you can see, many of the different bulbous shapes once again comes through. And these protagonists, they were the enemies of Doctor Who. They were a futuristic world that went and said, exterminate, exterminate, exterminate. So their idea was to destroy anything that they thought was lesser than them. So that kind of like made me think of like how people see human beings. So from that, I created this idea of this piece called Dalek, reminiscing of the idea of the bulbous shapes of the Dalek form, but also thinking about that bulbous shape of the breast when in historically, but also that shape, that bulbous shape also feels like when you have those balls, those soft balls, and you use it when you're nervous or you're worried about things, and so you have those like stress balls. So I was thinking about that as well. The outline also kind of has like a sunflower look, so I'm thinking about pollination, just like when that image of the pineapple that I saw in as a plant. At first, it looks very alien-like. It doesn't have a look that you would think you should eat. It doesn't even look like it comes from the earth. So I'm playing with all those things formally to create something that speaks to the content of what it is to be welcome or not welcomed. And in this case, I'm speaking about the idea of not being welcome into a space and creating a plant life that actually is destructive. So from there, it's the opposite. This piece is called Welcome. So the idea of like, what is the opposite of being welcome? What does it feel like? Many times, you know, when someone is not, you just get this feeling like, I don't feel welcome here. And everybody's like, why do you mean that? You just know. No one may have never said anything to you. You just have people looking at you crazy, or you assume they're looking at you crazy because they never seen anyone that looked like you. So this work also speaks to the idea of being initiated, just like in the different initiations in Burkina Faso, for instance, of boy to man in traditional African culture, or to girl to woman to a mother. There's different initiations, different ways of dressing, different masks, different things of ceremony. And I want to put that into the work. So each time you become initiated to a new future. Right now, we're living in a world that we see people as, oh, this is black, this is white. I'm trying to say that this work is speaking way further than that. It's speaking to what it is to be a human being. From there, once again, I see this idea of empireship, but also the beats and the power of hip hop music. And this is where I came up with this supersonic bond. First, the top kind of reminds you of like the Empire's Death Star, and the insides looks like the boom of a subwoofer when you hear this car banging and booming inside their Jeep or something. So it's like speaking to the idea of like from the beginning, this is like a wormhole that you can be, if you listen enough, you can become one with other people. You can become one with the power of knowing that you are not alone. Many times, for myself, when I had my first year in grad school, it was very weird to be the only person of color in the critique. And when I would speak, a lot of people were acting as if they never heard of any of these things I'm saying. We're like, how are you saying all this? You know, and then there was a big awakening in 2020 when we all were stuck in our homes and we were seeing, you know, black men being killed by crooked cops. And then that's when like, oh wow, now I'm starting to see what you were saying all this time. So this is like also speaking like this is opportunity. This vessel is like a way to listen and be absorbed into like a wormhole to actually know how other people are feeling. So from there, I wanted to create something that was like tangible, huggable, and I called this one like Baby Boom. It's like a small like woofer. So like just like a cute little cat or a cute dog, you want to cuddle it. So I'm speaking to the idea of like as human beings, we all want to know what it feels like and touch one another, especially now where we're going through this pandemic. I feel like my work has shown in a different way that like we're all like now relearning what it is to show how much we are thankful for someone there, because all we're being able to see is their eyes. We can't see their smile. We don't know if they're smiling in there in their mask. All we know is they could be like saying they are and they're angry at you. You don't know. So you have to find a new way to like show how that you're welcomed or loved or unloved, because some people see wearing a mask is intruding. So is that a loving thing to walk around without a mask? So we're now living into like a new way of like handshake is not a good thing. So I'm kind of speaking to that as well. The work is, of course, speaking about the Black body, but at the same time, as an artist, this is still universal. Just because I'm Black doesn't mean this work is only for someone of color. We can always see more into it. From there, I'm going to speak finally about how my work is progressed. I started to wanted to create this idea of a whole new world, a whole new place, and I call it Afro City. My thesis show was titled "Welcome to Afro City," but of course, because of the pandemic and all the schools were shut down, I didn't even have a thesis show. So my whole idea for the thesis show was to create a amazing, powerful idea of a party. And in that party, you would be initiated into a new world, just like in traditional African traditions. But this is going to speak to like a whole new tradition. No longer are you going to be who you say you are as of now. You're going to learn to be open to all things. So this piece is called Womb. And I was kind of struck by seeing that Maasai and seeing like a head coming out of the headdress. And it kind of reminded me of like a head coming out of a womb. So that started me thinking about like the idea of like, this is the opportunity now to become one with the environment you live in, the one with the people you're with, and actually doing true change, not just saying that we're going to talk about change. It's easy to say Black Lives Matter, or say that I'm going to do the climate strike, but really doing the hard work. So this is the opportunity to now become initiated into that new world. Here's, I call this piece Prepare. And this comes from like an idea of just like in the parties during the Enlightenment period, and even today, we want to make this party stand out. We want to make sure who was at the party, who's going to have the food, who's going to bring the food, where it's going to be at, what kind of music we're going to play. So it kind of speaks to that idea of preparing this new world that we're living in, called Afro City. Lastly, the last two pieces, this piece is called Basin. And it kind of reminded me of when I was doing the research to create this piece, I was thinking of Harry Potter. And in Harry Potter, they would like go through like this bird bath and put their head in there, and then they would see like the things of the past. So I felt like if we all like put our heads into something and have a drink in this basin, we could all wake up and become anew. From there, the last piece I'll show before we do the little Q&A is this piece is called Sanctuary. And it goes, the bottom half kind of speaks to the idea of the breastplate, and the top of the half speaks to vulnerability. Many times being the only person of color, especially in a space where you may even thought was hospitable. Like I said, I was in Iowa, and the University of Iowa is like very, liberal. But at the same time, I was having odd things being told to me, like you should be making work using a watermelon. Just things like that was said to me. So it's like, wow, You know, this is like 2020 and we're still talking about that I need to make work how I should make work, or I'm not really making art because I don't know. I thought you were another race, but I didn't know that this was a black artist. So why does it have to do with the work? So I'm speaking about the idea of like, here's a space where all people can go to and feel that sanctuary and that love and that true welcoming and that true hospitality. And with that, I thank you everyone for listening. And if you want to know more about my work, you can go to my IG account or my website, or you can just like contact me on email, and I'll gladly definitely respond back. So thank you guys for listening.